All right. Happy Friday, everybody, and welcome to another future-focused weekly update. I am your host, Christopher Lind, and if I am doing my job well, I am hopefully keeping you 10 steps ahead of what's happening at the intersection of business, technology, and the human experience. So first of all, thanks to everybody who watches, listens. I know I say this every time, and I promise it's not just part of my shtick. I really do genuinely appreciate the feedback, the input I get from people, things share, different reports with me or things that they say, hey, what do you think about this? I really love the engagement from the community. So thanks to all of you who even those of you who just passively listen. I enjoy, seeing the numbers and knowing that this is obviously adding value to a number of you folks as you try and navigate these crazy times. But if you do get value from this, my one ask is, would you share it with somebody? Would you like it or share it on social media or subscribe if you're not? I know a lot of my followers and views and stuff come from people who are not subscribed. It would mean a lot, and I would appreciate it greatly. But if nothing else, if you would just share it with somebody, that would mean a ton. With that, I'm going to get into this week is a little bit different. It's going to be similar flow, but I'm going to spend a good chunk of time digging into the World Economic Forum's Future of Jobs report. And I know last week I did a thing on SHRM and job automation. This time I'm going deeper into a much bigger report, but I've got a couple other updates that I'm going to cover as well. So I've got 3 updates because I want to be mindful of time. And I'm going to spend a good chunk of time on the World Economic Forum report. So I'm going to open with the first one, but then stick around because then I'm going to get into the World Economic Forum report, and then I'll close out with a statistic coming from some LinkedIn data that I think is concerning, but I think something that we can take from it. What does this really mean? So with that, let's get into it. The first one I couldn't not include, even though I wanted to spend a good chunk of time on the Future of Jobs report. If you have not been following, there's been a lot of headlines around this mysterious partnership between Sam Altman from OpenAI and Jony Ive, who is a really prominent designer from Apple. He was well known for a lot of his designs. And they've basically, OpenAI, and this is my best understanding of it based on all the different things I've read, acquired or did some sort of deal for like $6.5 billion. For some sort of AI gadget. And so it's a partnership with Jony Ive, who's the product designer, and he's got some AI gadget he's designing. We know there's not a whole lot of details. There's tons of speculation. So just as a warning, because I talk all the time about how there's so much misinformation out there, if you see pictures of a device or if you see things like this, some sites are really good at making sure they're clear that this is just an AI guess at what it is. Others make it look like these are like product specs for the things. We really don't know much about what they're doing, but what they're talking about and some of the things that are coming into the market, or at least coming to the surface about this, are showing there's really going to be a big play with some sort of device, screenless device that they're going to be partnering on. Now, to me, this doesn't surprise me. Some folks who maybe have been following the AI device may have thought of like the rabbit or the humane pin and been like, really, this thing again? Like, didn't this die out? To me, the hardware space is one I do anticipate we're going to see a lot of moves in, which that's why I wanted to focus on this, because it's more than just, ooh, hey, what's the hot trend? What is Sam Altman and Jony Ive working on? Yes, I want to talk about that, but I also want to talk about some of the bigger things that I think we all need to be thinking about as we start moving into this AI hardware space. So really what they're predicting this is going to be is some sort of screenless device with cameras and surround microphones and things like that that you can interact with, that's basically always on. That's basically your hands-free AI assistant that's with you wherever you go. Now, depending on who you are, I know I've got a very diverse group of people in my audience. You may have very different reactions to that. I know I have some folks who are going to be like, sweet, how much is it and when can I buy it? I know there are other folks that might have thrown up in their mouth a little bit just at the thought of these things. So I know that there's mixed reviews on how people are feeling about this. Let me say this first. I fully anticipate that this is going to be an inevitability we're going to have to just deal with, which is part of the reason I really want to focus on this, because this is going to open up a whole new can of worms for things like privacy, consent, all this kind of stuff that's going to be like, boy, how do we even manage that? But I don't think there's a world where we go, well, Rabbit and Humane, they didn't make it. This one's not either. For Sam Altman to spend $6.5 billion on something, and then somebody with the industry horsepower as Jony Ives getting into the game, whatever they're cooking, I'm guessing it's going to be pretty impactful. Now, that said, does it necessarily mean it's going to take off like a rocket? Not necessarily. I think a lot of people, myself included, really thought some of the wearable stuff was going to get moving more when Apple got into the VR space, when the Apple Vision Pro came out. And again, there's still just some hiccups with it. People are much more sensitive when it comes to wearable on like things like this. And, it's got to meet style demands. It's got to meet, there's a lot of things that go into it. So I don't anticipate that this is necessarily going to be the thing, but I think this is a very big step in where this is going to go. And so some of the things to consider about this, if you look at some of the product specs or some of the anticipated specs, again, nobody knows what this is. There's lots of, just so you know, if you look this thing up, and you can't look it up because like the name isn't really a thing yet. But if you just look up Jony Ive's Sam Altman AI gadget, you'll see all these AI predictions of what this thing looks like. And basically it looks like people are wearing this strange medallion with a camera, around their neck. Whether that's actually what it's going to be or not is still, to be seen. But what I think they're going for, and I think I don't want to say makes sense as in I agree with where it's going, but why I think it's going to be inevitable and why the big tech companies are going to push for this. AI right now, and I've said this for a long time, is hitting a data ceiling. There's just only so much data it can capture when it's just capturing, what it has access to. It needs more contextual data. And in order for it to get contextual data, it needs people, literally, because people are the product. It needs people taking it everywhere it goes and using it. And it needs to be basically consuming everything around it. So it can learn more contextual cues. It can learn more about all this stuff. It can start to, pick up on, well, why do people do things the way they do? What do they do? What are the different patterns? Right now, it's pulling this from very limited data sources. Even though it's consumed a ton of data, it's actually very limited from its contextual data, which is why I've said this is part of why humanoid robotics are such a big push, because the AI companies want humanoid robotics out doing things that humans do so it can capture that data. But again, a humanoid robot isn't a person. So it's not going to do people things. So there still then is this gap of, well, how do we capture all the data humanly possible on people things? And the only way you really do that is to have a device on a person at all times, capturing everything they're doing. Now, if you're in a camp of, this is super exciting, hopefully me talking about the idea of an AI device capturing literally everything going on around you at all times at least unsettles you a little bit at the thought of, well, what does that mean? Like everything? And in order for it to work, now again, the specs of how it works, the battery life and all this other stuff, there's still to be seen. And, these things aren't out on the market. And honestly, the last few have failed miserably. So I don't think we're in the clear, and this is just this will be the thing, but it very well could be. And what it could mean is that we could very quickly, similar to an Apple Watch or an iPhone, start to move into the age of computing and AI adoption, where literally large percentages of the population have an always on camera, always on speaker with them everywhere that they're basically interacting with. Now, I don't necessarily inherently go, oh, by default, that must be terrible. I mean, there's people who have personal assistants that follow them around everywhere they go today. So it's not completely foreign. So if you hear this and you just think sci-fi dystopian world, it isn't necessarily in that sense, in that this is something that happens today. It's just normally limited to a very elite few. Like, most people can't afford to have a personal assistant that literally follows them around, tracks everything they do, and then predicts what they might need and helps make sure that that gets there. So you can see where there is the appeal. I think as people start to understand what it can do, there will be the appeal to, well, yeah, of course I would want an AI device that just kind of gets to know my habits and my routines, and then just ask me, hey, do you want me to do this for you? Because you normally do this. And I go, oh yeah, that would be nice. Can you just take care of that? It knows your schedule, and it's like, do you need me to call you an Uber? And all you have to do is say, yeah, have it show up at this location, type of a thing. So are there some very practical use cases where it's democratizing something that historically it's been in existence? And that's, I think, the main point. What it would be doing is not, oh my gosh, we've never had this before. We have had this before. It just has only been limited to a very elite few. Now this could potentially democratize that, which is exactly what AI is designed to do. It's designed to democratize, or one of the things it's designed to do is to democratize things for everybody, so that everybody can have access to their own personal AI assistant that literally knows their every move and predicts what they're going to do and is involved in every conversation they have. So if you ever need to go, what did I say with so-and-so today? You don't have to look back at notes or a PDF planner or whatever you normally use. You just ask whatever your device is, and it's been listening and watching everything you did, and you can get things. Now you can start to see where, from a convenience standpoint, that sounds really good. And that's where there is a part of me that goes, I could see this being helpful. I could see this being something that could be really useful if it's tapped into all your, the things that you use and your calendars, and it knows your kind of habits and your idiosyncrasies and things like that, to have basically an AI that, predictively says, hey, would you like some help with this? Or knows that something just popped off and, helps talk you through it. I mean, I'm literally thinking of thousands of use cases when I saw the thing where my initial reaction was, what a dorky device. Like, if anybody starts walking around with this thing. But then I'm like, it looks dorky now because nobody's doing it. People thought smartwatches were stupid, and now I'm one of them. Like everybody, a lot of people have Apple Watches or some sort of smart device on their hand or wrist. So it's only dumb till it becomes mainstream. Do I think it's going to become mainstream? I absolutely do. If for no other for a couple of reasons. One, I think the convenience factor, and when people start to think about, once you get the early adopters that start using it and go, oh, you don't have one of these? Like, it's so great. I don't even have to think about things. As I'm making dinner, or as I'm getting ready for dinner, it asks me, hey, what are you thinking for dinner tonight? And it knows what's in the fridge. And, oh, you made that the last other night. Do you want me just to order out? And, it'll take care of the order for, what do you want? That level of convenience is going to be very appealing, especially if you can buy they don't have any pricing information on this thing yet, but if you can get one of these things for a few $100 and it can do all that for you, I can see at first people might be resistant, but slowly they're going to start going, well, that would be actually pretty nice. And then when your friends all start going, you don't have one of these? Like, good grief, how do you live? The pressure will mount. So I think the convenience factor alone, just like some people held out on not having a smartphone or a cell phone, and then eventually you got it, or some people back in the 90s didn't have internet, and then you did. There were the people who held out on cable, and then eventually it just kind of became, well, you don't have Netflix? Really? Why? So that's one of the reasons why. I think the convenience factor will be very appealing. And like I said, I don't necessarily think all of that is bad. There's some of that stuff that sounds appealing to me, to not necessarily always have to go, zip over to my computer to do something if I'm trying to remember or, put my thoughts together on something. So I can see it. The part that makes me a little bit hesitant is these big tech companies have an agenda, and the agenda isn't your well-being. It's not. I mean, yeah, do they want to make something convenient for you? Sure. But ultimately, they've got their agenda, and it's not your best interests. So when I start to think about, well, especially, OpenAI, if they're the ones producing this thing, I mean, it's not an on-device AI agent. If this was a totally on-device, not connected, literally just everything was managed on the device itself, no connection to the cloud unless you opted in, I feel like that might be a little bit different. But the second you start saying, well, this thing's connected, I'm guessing there's going to be a 5G version of it that's direct, basically you don't even have to bring a cell phone anymore. Now, again, don't be like, oh, Christopher said all this. It's still in the early days. We don't know much about it. But I'm just imagining, I know how these tech products end up evolving when you get into the hardware space. It's going to be 5G connected, or it's going to have a direct link to your phone so that it can access all your apps, because otherwise, how's it going to know to order you the Uber? How's it going to actually do it? How's it going to, place your Instacart order if it's not connected to the internet or a device that is internet connected? It's going to have to. So then that opens up all the other questions of, well, where does that data go? Who owns that data? What governance do I have over that data? What rights do I have to my own data? What are you doing with that data? How much personally identifiable information is maintained with that data? So that's even just on a personal side that you have to take into account, because now basically you are inviting a big corporation to send one of their people to literally follow you around and learn every possible thing about you. And they're going, yeah, we can do it for $700. Really? I mean, if only the elite were allowed to have a personal assistant, you really think they're going to offer that to the masses for $700 and call it a day and say, that's a good value transaction. If we make a few $1 billion off the sales of these products, we're good. No. That's not how these companies are thinking. They're thinking about the value of the data they're gathering. They're thinking about what they're going to be able to sell you because they know all this. They're thinking about the fact that now you're leaning on this thing that is with you at all times to, nudge you. It in many ways would have the ability to nudge your behavior. Aren't you getting hungry right now? Don't you normally eat XYZ snacks? Hey, did you know so-and-so came out with a new version of them? They're really popular right now. Do you want to try them? This has massive, massive implications on it. But not only that, I'm not only thinking about us as the individuals, but I'm also thinking about, what about all the other people you're interacting with? And what does this mean for consent? Even today, it's getting a little blurry. I even think about it. I have a meeting assistant that joins me on, not on all my meetings, but it joins me on specific meetings that I want tracked and managed, and make sure I have all the data from the meeting so that I can do my follow-ups and, pull together my thoughts, because while I can usually remember a lot of stuff, there's usually the something that I'm like, oh, what was that thing? And I'm really bad at taking notes. So having an AI note taker is great for me, but I am always very sensitive to the people I'm on a call with to say, hey, are you comfortable with this? Are you fine with it? Here's what I'm doing with it. Here's how the data is used. If you have any concerns, let me know if there's a portion of this you want me not to record. Let's save that for the end and I'll kick my meeting assistant out, type of a thing. I'm very respectful and mindful of that. Now, I can do that in a virtual meeting environment. I can't do that if I have a device that's literally just I don't even remember it's there, and I'm just walking down the street and it's literally got a 360 cam on it, scanning every single person I walk by. Or as I'm sitting in a restaurant, it's listening in surround sound to every conversation going on around. I can't walk around the restaurant and go, hey, everyone, just so you know, I have my AI device with me here. If there's anything you don't want recorded or whatever, please leave the restaurant. I can't do that. So there's not a good way to manage any of this. And I do think about, well, what does this actually mean and look like for people? And now, how do you, I already said it would be hard to manage consent of, if it's just my own data, what are you doing with my own data? Well, now I'm potentially capturing countless people's data in a single day. What's happening with their data? How is it being managed? Is it, because if you really understand AI, you know it's picking up on literally every pattern. It's not missing a thing. It's literally picking up the voice print of every person that walks by and can easily identify it and then triangulate who was that person. It's going to be able to pick up everyone else with a device in a 3-mile radius who also interacted with that person and know, again, is it going to put that in a report? Probably not, but is it going to be documented somewhere? Yes. How do you manage consent for that? And I think that's one of the things that I have not seen. And I think that's one of the reasons why some of the previous devices didn't fare well is, I know I knew somebody who had one of these pins, and literally everywhere they went, as soon as people saw it, they were like, I'm not talking to you till you get rid of that thing. And it became such a nuisance. People they just were like, this is dumb. Like, I can't even use it because people were so uncomfortable. They just won't talk to me. So I put that out there because I think these are things we need to start thinking through. But in my opinion, this is an inevitability. There were people that thought the internet wasn't going to make it. There were people that thought smartphones weren't going to make it. There were people that thought, there's people that now are like, yeah, there's no way we're going to have an AI device that's on all the time on everybody. It's like, well, there probably is, and it is going to happen. It's a matter of when, what it looks like, who's behind it, and what kind of things do we need to demand and expect. But I think for you as the listeners, I think it's something you need to start wrestling with. Like, what is your comfort level and where is the line of convenience too far? Because the pressure to just continue doing this, now you talk to somebody, and if you bump into somebody, I guess now it's a little different. It used to be years ago, if you were like, you don't have a smartphone, what's wrong with you? Now, if you say, no, I don't have a smartphone, I got rid of it because I saw how addictive it was and I wanted nothing to do with it, people were like, mad respect, man. Good for you. So I think we will inevitably see that curve where this will probably be slow to take off. Then it's going to explode. It's going to be everywhere. Then we're going to start to see some of the consequences, and then we're going to start to see people pull back. But the penetration of it's still going to be too deep for us to completely, get away from it. And so I still am in the early stages of myself kind of wrestling through what does this mean and how am I thinking about it? And I'm bringing up these things in conversations with, business leaders. Because again, there's lots of people interested in them. And it's usually people in power who have something to gain by knowing a lot about a certain group of people. Companies, they're very open to their remote employees having one of these corporate devices tethered around their neck so that the company can know where they are, what they're doing, how frequently they're doing it, all this other stuff. Do I think that's okay? No. But we're going to have to start redrawing the lines around privacy, consent, data protection, like all this stuff. And this is probably going to open it up even more than some of the other things we did. It's a nightmare right now with just like people dumping stuff into ChatGPT that's like, you did what? You dumped the corporate, top secret files into an OpenAI platform that can easily be reverse engineered to get that data out. That's a problem. This is, I think, going to bring us into a whole new world of those problems. And I don't know that I have answers yet. And again, I don't know that I'll ever have the answers, but I wanted to bring this up because I think it's something that we all need to start thinking about because it will come. It's a matter of when and how far off are we? And I know that there are the folks who are going to go, well, our phones are already listening to us all the time. Yes, they are, but not quite in the same way that something like this would be. And yes, there are a lot of parallels. And I've already talked to some people who are like, why would you even be worried about this? This is already happening. Everybody's got an AI device walking around with them everywhere, which is also to me where I'm struggling with why a new piece of hardware? Why wouldn't we tap into the existing ecosystem of hardware? I don't want to wear a stupid medallion around my neck. If I'm going to have something like this, I'd rather just have my Apple Watch, available, but I'd want to be able to purge my daily data, and only, but see, this is where even then the administration of, well, what do you keep? What do you dump? How do you make sure people are aware of what you're keeping, dumping? It opens up a whole lot of ethical things. And so, like I said, I don't have my thoughts fully fleshed out on this, but am starting to wrestle through these, starting to talk with different hardware and AI companies about how they're using responsible AI practices in this, because if they're going to get adoption, they're going to have to be able to answer some of these questions. Because I will say a lot of people I talk to are very, very uncomfortable with this. They're not there. I talked to one person the other day. They said if somebody showed up with that thing at my house, I'd say, get out until you take it off. That thing's not allowed in my house. So there's definitely some resistance to it, but in the public square, I don't know. So I'm curious your thoughts. I'd love, comment, send me a message. I'm really curious, would you wear one of these if it does look like, I don't know if I would wear the one that it looks like, but would you wear something like this? Would you care if your Apple Watch was literally listening and watching everything you were doing all day? And what would it change? I don't know. It's a lot, which is why I just wanted to open the floor for this and actually at least get people starting to think about it. Because a lot of the people I talked to were like, oh yeah, I would never. And I'm like, well, you might not have a choice in that. So you might have to think through this. The temptation, the pressure might mount to a point where you start to have to decide, and actually better to be thinking about it and go into it with a plan than you get one of these things for Christmas and you haven't really thought through this stuff. So I'll stop there because I could probably talk for the rest of the afternoon on just that device. I want to transition over, and who knows, maybe I'll only get through 2 updates because these are a little bit longer. So let's talk about the World Economic Forum's Future of Jobs report for 2025. If you want, I would highly encourage you to go download it. It's pretty easy to find. By the way, I occasionally do get messages from people, hey, Christopher, it'd be great if you had more transitions or B-roll or, edits in with all this stuff. It's just me. So I appreciate the feedback. I don't have the time or the capacity to do that. So if you know somebody who wants an internship, unpaid internship with some free coaching or something, and they want to do video editing for me, by all means, send them my way. But if you're waiting on me on my own time to spend hours doing post work, it's not going to happen. So that's why I say, go find the report. You can easily find it again, the World Economic Future of Jobs report. So let's talk about what the World Economic Future of Jobs report has to say, because it is a long one. I will tell you right now, it's 290 pages. I'm not going to go through the whole report. There is a ton of information in here, and it's something that I will probably be going through for quite some time. But I did take some time going through and looking for some of the things that jumped out at me as things that present themselves as one thing that I think there's more to it than that. There's some of the things in there that I don't necessarily, it's fully representing the full picture of it. I think there's some things in there that it's just not thinking about accurately or might just be missing on. And so I just want to talk through those to give some additional perspective, because it's a lot to take in. It's really a lot to take in. And also, please, I know World Economic Forum can get politicized. I'm not coming at this from a political angle, so please don't blow me up in the comments or anything saying you're coming at it from, I literally just read the report, looked at the data, and then had some reflections and thoughts based on that I think would be helpful for folks. So I've got a few of them that I want to talk through. Now, one of the things that was really interesting about it is that, I continue to be, well, let me just say, here's where we are in the change curve. And this report reflects this. I think we are finally getting to a point where everyone is openly acknowledging AI is going to change everything, or at least most people are recognizing that. I don't think they know exactly what that means. I think that's one of the biggest opportunities right now. But in the report, it talked about the fact 86% of employers are fully anticipating AI to radically transform their business by 2030. Now, that's huge. almost 9 out of 10 businesses go, whatever it is we're doing, it's going to change dramatically as a result of AI. I think in some ways that's a good thing, because it means, all right, more and more people are recognizing like, hey, we gotta recognize this is a force to be reckoned with. I think what concerns me, and it's why I've created things like the AI effectiveness report, it's why I'm doing my Pathfinder pulse analysis, it's why I continued creating content like this, is because not only did the report reflect this, but my conversations validate the fact that people recognize, 2030 is going to be here in no time. I think about the fact we're halfway through 2025 now, basically. 2030 is going to be here. For a business to transform in 5 years, and yet when I talk to many people and go, so how's it transforming your business? What are you doing to prepare for that? How are you proactively getting involved? A lot of people don't have answers to those questions. They still are, how ready are your people? Do you know where they sit? Do they know how to use it? Yeah, well, I think they do. We have a lot of people using AI. Yeah, just because they use ChatGPT or because you have Copilot or Gemini in your organization does not mean people know what they're doing. It does not mean people are using it effectively. It does not mean they understand the implications of stuff. That's why you see things like top secret confidential data showing up in Gen AI, because somebody's like, oh, I don't know. I just took the PDF and put it in there so I could ask it for help. You did what? I just had my meeting assistant join this top secret meeting and somebody just automatically accepted him in. I didn't think twice about it. So I just say that I think it's good that more and more people are recognizing like, whoa, this is a force to be reckoned with. We know it's going to have transformation impact. It's a bit frightening to me that many recognize that much transformation is going to happen in 5 years, and very few people can answer some of the foundational follow-up questions that I ask when I start digging into AI transformation. And so I promise I'm not just saying that to try and push what I do and the things that I do. I just know how long business transformation takes. 5 years is not very long to transform a business. And that's assuming you know what you're doing already and you have a clear plan and you go, here's our 5-year strat. And here's how we're getting our employees ready. Here's how our business systems are changing. Here's how our overall strategy is changing. You get all that in place, 5 years is still a stretch to pull it off. So saying, yeah, I know in 5 years we got to be there, and then go, do you have like a roadmap? And many don't. That's concerning to me. So if you're listening to this going, I'm in that 86%. And I also, I guess, Christopher happened to be the one that goes, I couldn't really articulate to you what it means or how we're going to go about doing it. Please, whether you're working with me, it's not about you have to work with me. Get some help figuring that out, or you're going to be in some serious trouble. And that was one thing that came through in this. And the problem is, the longer you wait, the more bad decisions you make because you're rushed. You're hurrying, and that's when people go, well, we just need to cut this function because I think an agent can do it, or we got to transform this, and you just make bad decisions because you're in a hurry and you got to transform, but you haven't figured out how. So, do I have a ton of things that can help with it? Yes. Would I love to help anybody? Absolutely. Would I only want you getting help if it's through me? No. Just please, seriously, take this seriously and get started on it, because 2030 is not long. And if you really look at some of the data, I think 2030 is a stretch to say it's going to take 2030 for some of these things to need to happen. I think we're going to start to see some major movements in 2020-30 is the long end of that tail. I think a lot of businesses are going to be forced to transform well before that. So the clock is ticking. And that's not me being alarmist. That's not me trying to freak people out. That's me going, this is serious and you need to take it seriously. And I think the report validates the severity of it. I think what's missing is how unprepared people are for it. Okay. One of the things that I thought was a little deceptive was in the report, it showed the need for skill instability, how many skills are going to be changing. And it actually looked positive in the report. It looked like, this year and I think next year, don't quote me on it, but I think the next 2 years, it was like skill instability was going to go up. And then by 2030, it was going to come back down. It was going to go all the way to almost 60% and then trim back to 40, which, by the way, don't think 40% skill disruption is like, yeah, that's like status quo. That's still a lot of transformation. But it can look like, oh, so it's going to get better. So we'll be more stable by 2030. It's going to get a little crazier, but then it's going to start to stabilize. I don't think that's what's really going on here. I think what's actually going on here is some of the skill transformation that needs to happen is starting to go invisible. We're not seeing it as much because we have less visibility into what people are doing and how they're doing it. And we don't really know where are people using AI to augment, where are they not. We're turning more things over to AI, so we don't really know. We actually are knowing less and less about work, which to me is unfortunate because we should have been trying to know more about work so we could be surgical and intentional about what we're doing. And instead, we kind of threw AI into it without a whole lot of preparation. And because now it seems to be working, we're like, hey, I think we're good, which is why I think we start to see that number shrink is we get this false sense of it's getting better. We're in a better spot. When actually, I don't think that's the case. I think the decay is now hiding under rocks. It's buried in, storage rooms, things like that. And we're not going to see it the same way we would. So if anything, I think this is why we need to put a more intentional focus. Now, you might go, well, Christopher, isn't that just because that's the space you're in? And, you just rolled out this AI effectiveness report that's supposed to help identifying people what they need to do. Yes, but it was reversed. I was seeing this problem going, we need this to help mitigate this problem. So I'm going to create something to help mitigate the problem, not I'm creating something, now I'm trying to advertise a problem. So I'm just being totally transparent with that because I continue seeing some of these things where people keep trying to kick this stuff down the road, and reports like this that give this indication of, oh, cool. So skills are going to stabilize. Skills are not going to stabilize. They're not going to stabilize. We might get more comfortable. AI may be able to pick up more of the slack and cover things, just like being in the office can cover some of the communication and relational breakdowns because you're like, no, we're good. We went to lunch. Well, you did, but you really don't have a relationship. I think AI is doing some of those same things. It's hiding the skill decay. It's hiding the gaps because we just don't see it. And so we assume it's fine. And I think that's actually reflected in the predictions of the report. The report's not framing it that way. And I think that was one of my concerns with it is similar to last week's SHRM report saying, oh, only 12% of jobs are at high or very high risk of automation. That's being interpreted as, well, so I'm safe then. No, that's not what it's saying. And I think this is a similar one. Oh, skills are getting better, so I can kind of stay where I am. Like, no, that's not what it's saying. So don't interpret it that way. All right. One of the other ones that I thought was really interesting was some of the executive touch points. So in the report, it talks about 85% of executives have plans to upskill, but then 40% of executives are also planning on reducing their staff because they won't need the people anymore. And so there's a little bit of this dichotomy of, wait, you're upskilling so you can get rid of people. And I don't think there's a lot of, I think the problem is there's a little bit of confusion around where do we need skills and what are we actually doing? This goes back to my first point. I don't think people really know what they're doing. So as a result, they're going, yes, we need to upskill because the people we have need to be better, but we also don't need people. And if you then peel back the layers and go, okay, so what skills do you need to upskill? Well, we're not really sure on that. Well, who are the 40% of people you don't think you're going to need anymore? Well, we haven't really clearly defined that. What are the people going to do that you're keeping behind that you've upskilled? Well, we haven't really figured that out yet. And so I think you're seeing this in some of the conflicting numbers of, so you're upskilling, but you're reducing, but there's also new hiring that's happening too, based on different skill. Like there's a general understanding, similar to the first point. There's a general understanding that all three of these things need to happen. We need to upskill our current people. We're going to need to hire new people into things that we have not historically had before. And there are going to be things that go away, whether it actually means getting rid of people or whether it means certain roles move and people get upskilled into new roles. There's an understanding those three things need to happen. There's not an understanding of why, how, when, where. And so, if anything, I think the report reveals just how unprepared organizations are for this, which again validates this point of organizations either need to really focus their existing talent on being intentional and figuring this out, or you need to get some help to help get your arms around this. Because if you don't, this is going to come back and bite you hard, really, really, really hard. Now, that's that one. The other thing I thought was interesting was it talked about the different roles. So if you get into it, you'll see, where are the roles that are, again, it's a little bit of a duplication of the SHRM report of like what roles are highest risk for automation. And a lot of the roles that are highest risk are very, I guess on a surface level, you would assume that they're very automatable. Data entry people, a bank teller, legal secretaries were just some of the examples, which you might be like, oh yeah, because this is what they do. One, I think that raises concerns for me because I've spent time actually studying what these people do. And while yes, there are large portions of their job that might be very automatable, there's also large portions of it that are not. And so to just make a blind assumption that, oh, we can get rid of this role because it's automatable is, in my opinion, a big mistake. So I think, and hang on here, I'll get my camera going again. There we go. I think that's a big mistake. So there's that. But then there's the other angle, which is if you look at some of the high automatable jobs, they're not ones you would expect to be high automatable, like graphic designer was in there, customer service person, which I get sometimes people assume customer service is just, hi, can I take your, hi, what's wrong here? Let me process your return. But that's not really what customer service is. So I think you're seeing a lot of these relational and creative jobs now starting to go in, which goes back to my point before, this idea that, oh, these jobs won't be touched. It's not true. And this report reflects that. I mean, there's diversity across the entire spectrum of jobs, which to me is still incomplete, and that I stand behind my statement. Every job as you know it today will be affected by AI. But some are going to be seen and perceived as more, we don't need those anymore, which I think in some cases may be true, in some not. But that I think we really need to be mindful of. And I think we really have to be prepared. And again, the number of times I've seen companies just wipe out groups because they don't think they need it anymore, or they think AI can do it. It never works well. I've yet to see it ever executed and somebody goes, that was a really smart move. I'm glad we did that. That we didn't have any blowback type of a thing. Do people work through it? Sometimes it's a really big mess. So one of the things I also thought was interesting in the report, so it showed where the biggest room for growth is, where there were some interesting ones in here. And I want to kind of contextualize this because the report is misleading. And I think this is an important piece. One, you would think the greatest job growth would be in tech, AI specialists, AI analysts, fintech, whatever. On the report, in some ways, it looks like it because the percentage is the biggest growth. But you can't be fooled by that, because just because the percentage is big doesn't mean that's tons of jobs. If you only have one in a company and it jumps to 3, that's a huge jump percentage-wise, but you really only added 2 jobs. So when you see, whoa, AI specialist is going to grow by this much, it's like, well, companies might not have any of them, or they might only have a couple. So adding a few more is not a complete transformation of the work. And I say that because I know lots of people who feel pressure to be like, oh, so what I need to do now is go into AI engineering, or, it's like, no, just because, don't be fooled by those percentages. Interestingly, the actual numbers were in things like delivery drivers, farming, agriculture was huge in the report, construction and trades, things like that. So even like when I think about what I'm talking with my kids about, I'm like, hey, like, where might you really want to spend your time, or what might be some big things? So just, I think that is an important factor to call out. And I actually think some of the vulnerable ones, while the percentage of growth might be big in like an AI specialist or a software engineer, type of a thing. Let's not say software engineer, because I think that one's going to shrink big time. But if you look at it, some of those are the most vulnerable, because those are the ones that are changing like boom, like, hey, do you want to be a, whatever, this type of digital AI, whatever. And then 6 months later, a new model comes out. It's like, oh yeah, we don't need those anymore. We're seeing this with coders and software engineers, where companies used to have armies of them. And now they're going, well, we don't really need armies of them anymore. And so the great reset is happening in there. So that's where I just, as people are thinking about, to the parents out there who are thinking about your kids and future generations and stuff like that, be careful that you don't buy into the whole, oh, okay, well, I mean, I remember there was a season, it's why I ended up getting pushed into software engineering at first, it was like, well, that's what everybody's going to need to be. And so because I was good at it and people saw it, they said, well, Christopher, obviously that's what you need to do. And then I got into it and went, yeah, I could do it, but that's not what I want to do, type of a thing. And so I think the other thing, though, to executive leaders that they need to be paying attention to is they don't fall for the same trap, because they could inadvertently invest and focus their strategies around these seemingly big percentage, high profile roles, or high, oh, AI, this, we got to dump all our resources into that, not realizing the vast majority of where your company's growing, or the people who have the most needs, are not that group. And you may create an inequality that actually hampers your business's ability to perform well. And so I think those are really key indicators that the report highlights that can be misinterpreted and result in people making the wrong decisions. So just, again, I think you just need to be careful how you interpret that. Now, another one that I thought was really interesting was the distribution of work and how that's going to change. And this goes back to something that you've heard me say now multiple times, but if you listen to me, I say it all the time. Every job is going to be disrupted. By 2030, there's this one chart that has the 3 bars right next to it, and it shows how much of the work is done by humans, how much is done by machines, how much is done like hybrid, and you see the distribution start to break. And by 2030, a lot of work is going to be performed by machines, a lot of the actual work itself. Now, I think there's 2 problems with this that we just, again, need to get in front of. Is one, are we handing off the right work? Because just because we go, oh yeah, so by this point, this percentage of things should be done by machines, you can end up just saying that's a target, so whatever we got to do to get there, just get there, instead of going, well, okay, but what work? Because just because percentages change, you can't just say, well, let the machines decide, or whatever people do. That's why I created the AI effectiveness report, was to say, you need people who can make surgical, wise decisions about how to do that. Are your people equipped to make those decisions well? Do you have managers in place that can look at the work on their teams and go, that is ripe for automation and we should be automating that. That, I don't care if a machine could do it, it shouldn't do it, and therefore we should have this person specialize in that. You need people capable and equipped to know how to do that. Or, if you look at the augmentation percentage, that grows as well. Do you have people that are equipped to work well alongside AI? Because if they're not, yeah, they might be augmenting the work, but it's not going to be done well. And so I think as you look at some of this stuff, the reality is machines are going to be doing more. That's inevitable. There's no way of getting around it. As the machines become more advanced and capable and all this stuff, they're going to be doing more. We now are at this critical juncture where we can't stop that change from happening, but we can influence how it happens to make sure it's the right thing. And I think this is something that everybody's so busy doing stuff, they're not taking the time to think through these things. And they're talking about automation when I think it should be more strategic augmentation. And that may sound just like I'm mincing words, but I think if you get this wrong, it's going to lead to complete chaos. All right, I'm coming into the home search. I'm definitely not going to get to the third update. Couple things that I thought came into the report, but didn't necessarily, or just I'm not hearing enough in conversations, is we're not talking enough about the aging population. There's just kind of this sense that, with all this AI and all this stuff, people will be able to work forever, and like growing up in the funeral business, people are going to die. People are going to retire. They're not going to be able to do stuff, which not only is going to change who's in your workforce and what they're able to do, but it's also going to put pressure on different industries like healthcare. How are we educating and preparing people? It's going to change some big macro things that I don't necessarily think companies are preparing for. And it again, as a good example, companies are not investing enough in, and I don't want to say young is like in a, stereotypical, but like young talent. They're not investing in how are we preparing these people, because eventually these folks who've been around forever, they're going to leave. Our senior executives at some point are going to retire or have a heart attack or whatever, and we're not thinking ahead of how do we make sure people are there. We've got a lot of younger folks in low income, it's harder to find a job and they're saddled with debt. And so now we're going, well, jobs don't pay as much because AI can do so much of it. It's like, well, then you're actually isolating the population that you actually need, that you're going to need, because they can't come work for you. And then you're going to be scrambling to get them at the last minute. You're going to end up paying a premium later versus paying them what they should get paid and preparing them for growth. I don't know that it talked enough about kind of the green skills around like, hey, how are we thinking sustainability? How are we thinking clean energy? How are we doing some of that stuff? It's in there, but I think these are some of the other big macro things that we need to consider. So I will probably continue digging more into this. I don't know that I'll do as much of an in-depth on it again, but I just wanted to bring up, those were some of the biggest things that happened. And I think the big thing that comes out of that future of jobs report is the future of work that we're walking into, that is here. It's not coming, it's here. It's no longer the future of work, it's just work. It's not about the tech. It's not about these AI models. It's not about whether you're wearing an AI device. It's about the people who ultimately have to drive this. I was in a LinkedIn conversation yesterday, and we were talking about the fact that somebody said, well, is AI learning to be human? Is it learning, how to be more human? And I'm like, no, it's learning about humans, but even when it's learning how to be human, it's being human as directed by a human. So no, it's not really learning how to be human because it's not thinking for itself. It's being directed by someone to behave in a human way. At the end of the day, there's always humans behind it. And that is not at the forefront of these conversations. There still is this prominent mindset that, AGI, ASI is going to get here and you're just not even going to need people to think. And it's like, yes, you are, because somebody's going to have to tell it what to focus its attention on. It's the same thing, just a really practical example, and then I'll be done. This is iconic, or not iconic. This is on par with every company I've ever seen that says, we're going to do away with managers because we don't need managers. We've got highly intelligent, highly skilled people who know what to do and can therefore just operate autonomously. So we're going to do away with all hierarchy because we hire the best. They don't need to be led. I can show you the data that shows that goes wrong every single time, because somebody needs to direct, somebody needs to steer, somebody needs to help coach and guide and set frameworks and guardrails. Somebody ends up having to do that. And when you just say, well, we're not going to put anybody in charge, we're just going to let the prisoners run the asylum, like, it goes down in flames real fast. So, all right, enough there. I'm not going to get to number 3. We'll talk more next week. I hope this was helpful. Definitely check out the Future of Jobs report, and definitely comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts on what you think of this little AI, if it ends up being a necklace or whatever it is. Curious if you would actually wear one. But with that, I hope you have a great week, and we will see you on the other side.